Hubble. He gained a lot of ops experience as director of SOHO on HST SM4. He was a system engineer, then an ops manager on that same mission. And we really felt that his systems and ops experience prepared him to take on these DPM and PM roles on the Space Network Ground Segment Sustainment System, the Transitioning Exoplanet Survey Satellite, and the Neutron Star Interior Composition Explorer mission, or NICER. And now he's serving both as the DPM on JEDI, which is the Global Ecosystem Dynamics Investigation. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little internet issues, connectivity issues, and now he's the project manager on JPSS. I know that's a lot to understand how someone can have that much experience in that little time. So you can see why we chose Keith. He worked both cost and fixed price contracts, which is cool. And he's worked throughout the entire project life cycle from formulation all the way to ops. He's led smaller and even larger projects. So when we heard about the insight he provided in his talk during the Virtual Project Management Challenge, we were all in on Keith. Now I'm going to hand it over to Andrea to discuss time management and delegation.
All right, thanks, Milton. So like Milt said, we really enjoyed our conversation with Keith. His wealth of experience really led to some great lessons and tips. And as we were asking our questions, we really saw how there were some overarching themes that we tried to group together. So I'm going to be talking about some of the things that come under team management. And one of the first things was asking Keith, with such a big job, is how do you manage your time? And it's no surprise with his current role, it's that you cannot do everything. Now, Keith loves his job. He loves understanding the science behind it. So he obviously works more than the 40-hour week like most of us. But with knowing that we're together, we're stronger, and you can't do it all, he said delegation is key. So it's really important to him to be able to rely on the others to bring him information that he needs. So with having to delegate, it's always really important, he said, to be specific about what you want and when you need it. You really have to time box that and set those expectations. You want to make sure that you're specific so you're not asking anyone to just bring you a rock, because otherwise he's going to be disappointed and you're going to be frustrated. Along with delegation, he talked about making sure to empower your team members to own their tasks. And something our coach said, which was really good, was that you have to remember, if you're going to give somebody responsibility, you have to give them the authority to make it happen. So since delegation is so important with Keith's time management, we asked, how he manages the delegation, or what are some tips. And one of the really key points was to remember there's no one-size-fits-all box. You may change your style of how you delegate depending on who your team members are or the issues are that you're dealing with. So some team members might require additional oversight or guidance, and that's fine. You just have to really be aware of that. It's really important for you to determine where your problems are, prioritize those problems or any threats to the schedule, and focus your attention there when keeping in mind what you should or should not delegate. So continually monitoring your threats to your schedule. Next slide, please. So since being able to delegate tasks is such an important part of the role, you also have to learn how to coach to get the best performance out of your team and hold them accountable. So as we talked about coaching, Keith said, set realistic expectations for your team members and clearly identify the goals. Now, realistic doesn't mean easy. And it was funny, he said something that we also heard this morning from Mr. Jerzik, which is to challenge your team members. Mr. Jerzik talked about, always feeling like he had an assignment that he was stretched a little bit. And that's something Keith talked about too, is that you want to challenge people. You might see more potential in them than they realize, and, check in on them, but help them reach goals maybe beyond what they know they can do. So as you're working on their performance, you have to make sure you follow up with people. You don't want to just throw things over the fence, but you need to stay engaged and make sure they're following through on their tasks, because ultimately, even though they're the team and you've delegated, it is still your responsibility. Sometimes when working with the team, though, it leads to some tough conversations on accountability if someone may not be meeting the expectations or the tasks that you've laid out. And so Keith's big advice was be honest with the team members if they're falling behind. Have an open conversation to understand what the problems might be, whether it may be a technical issue or a personal issue. But once you've had that conversation, give the team member a chance to fix the situation. Now, if the situation still goes unresolved, you do get to the point where you have to bring someone else in, because overall you have to protect your schedule. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay. And the final part of this presentation was asking Keith how he brings confidence and assertiveness to his project management style. And like Milt said, Keith was very impressive, and we all could really sense how excited he was about his work. So he recommended bring that enthusiasm and excitement about the work you do to your team. You want to use your passion to ignite the enthusiasm with others, because that really helps get the best out of your team. You want them to understand where things are going with the vision, so you should really make sure you take the time to communicate that vision and get your team to buy in on it. Also, you have to look out for your team and not just follow the status quo. We all have standard ways we've seen of doing documentation or meetings or reviews, but if you see something isn't working for your team, challenge it and fix it. You might need to come up with a new approach than what you've done on a previous project, but it's important for the integrity of your team to challenge that status quo and fix things to make it easier for them. Also, Keith, like a lot of us, are involved in missions that have many partners spread out over the country. And it's easy for people to maybe feel like they're in silos. So you have to make sure everyone feels like they're a part of the mission and they're a part of the team, and that they haven't just kind of been left in the corner. So his advice was that he uses his regular vendor meetings to always at the beginning give an update on the status of the mission and what's going on and the goals, so that everyone really has bought in and feels like they're part of the bigger well-being. Although it's challenging right now with COVID, he also highly recommends traveling to visit vendors. The face-to-face time and understanding what's going on in the facilities is really important. Also, be sure to communicate good news. Sometimes we're very quick to communicate the bad news, but we also need to take the time to send out encouraging emails and letting everyone know all the good work that's happening overall. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kristen, who's going to be talking about communication and strategic vision.
Thank you, Andrea. So yes, I'll be talking about Keith's advice related to strategic thinking and communication, and also with respect to executive presentations and public speaking. So we asked Keith about strategic thinking, and specifically how important is strategic thinking and the big picture view to executing the project. And he conveyed that it's always really important to keep in mind where you're going and to be continuously communicating that to the team. He said one thing that he does is know the schedule inside and out, and that's a tool that he uses to kind of keep that overall picture in mind and the roadmap for where the project's trying to go. He also talked about understanding how the big picture and how everything fits together. So, projects can be a bit like puzzles, and understanding how all those pieces fit together is important. And that's important especially if you find that the project is having an issue. And that relates to the critical path. Knowing what the critical path is, and knowing what's affecting the critical path and how all the pieces fit together allows you to kind of focus on what things you can get done and what things you can keep moving forward in spite of the challenges you may be facing. He mentioned that there's always problems, and so even when there are problems, you really have to keep the focus on the end goal and maintain the mission focus. The other thing we talked about was communication strategies. Kind of the two big takeaways on communication is that the project manager should own the message and should control the message. And so he talked about that with respect to communicating both down and into the team and up and out to management or program office. What he mentioned was it's best to be transparent and honest, but you want to don't want to make people panic. So it's important how you convey the message. He also talked about the project manager being the bearer of both good news and bad news, and staying ahead of communication to headquarters. And that it's important that information comes from the project manager and not outside sources. You wouldn't want it showing up on Space News first, for example. And then finally, he said, over communicate so no one tries to fill in the blanks with things they do not know. And I just thought that was so true, that it's really important to provide the information so people don't start guessing or making assumptions about what's going on. Next slide. Next slide. Can't tell if I'm having an internet issue or if it's...
We can still hear you, Kristen.
Okay, thank you. So related to public speaking and presentations, the big message was get out there and do it. The more presentations you give, the better you'll get at it. You'll get to be with it. He also talked about practicing and knowing the materials. So he talked about, if you have a mission status review or, a design review or things of that nature that you're going to be speaking at, to actually take the time to kind of do a dry run, stand in front of a mirror and practice what you're going to say before you get out there and do it. The other thing he mentioned was taking a Toastmasters class or a public speaking class. And he gave us an example of doing that and how, you have to pick a topic out of a hat and stand up and talk on something that you may not know much about, and how it's just really great to practice the skill of being able to answer questions or kind of speak on a topic and formulate your thoughts quickly. So it gives you an opportunity to practice that in a safe environment. The other thing he mentioned was anticipating questions. Back to knowing the material, the more comfortable you are with the material and the topic, the more confident you'll be. And finally, to bring some humor or levity to it where it makes sense to do that. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Milton to talk about Keith's advice on challenges.
Thanks, Kristen. I'm sorry, I was dealing with some internet challenges right then. Let's talk about dealing with challenges real time. Thank you, Kristen. Another key question we had for Keith was, what was his biggest challenge and what processes and tools does he utilize? Based on his response, we were able to determine some steps or develop a process that he takes to address issues. Keith's biggest and current challenge is managing a fixed price contract of multiple spacecraft deliveries as part of JPSS. And the first step that he took to address issues like this was to set the culture, which is really huge. He's just constantly instilling, setting a culture of being proactive and managing risk, being proactive and managing risk. Also, you have to think beyond the issues that you're having today. That's the short-term issues you see on the slide, and get the team to think about what could be happening in the future and all the nuances in the schedule as Andrea described and with the risk, so that we can anticipate, be more proactive in terms of anticipating what's going to happen. And finally, this process never stops. You may find some wins, you may have some places where you solve some problems, but you don't stop there. You keep iterating on that. And even throughout this process, you have to keep up-level management informed. They need to be made aware of risk and potentials for potential concerns before they become an issue. So on the next slide, we'll discuss some of the tools that he talked about for dealing with challenges. And the tools are very similar to what Andrea and Kristen described earlier. Keith's tools truly are the people. That's what he talked about. The people make the mission, which is so true. And if everyone's anticipating problems and managing risk, we can all be more proactive in making decisions and looking ahead. But the key thing is the team has to feel a sense of ownership. They have to feel engaged and they have to feel empowered. And part of the thing that Keith does really well is he helps develop his people and he gives them the resources they need to make those decisions and be confident in moving forward. Another thing, we wanted to hit Keith with another challenge because it's something we're all dealing with. And he spoke on the challenge of COVID-19. This has been a big challenge for me on OSAM, one, because of our cost posture and STMD, as well as we have two large external contracted efforts on fixed price contracts. So the nuggets that he gave us was to stay true to contract. And it's so true. When you're resource constrained, you want to do a lot of different things, but he said you really have to stay true to contract, but also try to find some areas where you can reward whenever possible. And you have to be resourceful and innovative to do that within the bounds of a fixed price contract. Ultimately, you're trying to steer everybody back to mission success. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about all of our lessons learned.
So for me personally, one of the biggest lessons learned I appreciated from Keith was the part about making all of your counterparts feel like they're part of a team. Currently, with being a payload manager, I'm working with instrument teams at Goddard, APL, JPL, and a private industry in California. So really recognizing with everyone being spread out and the challenges of COVID, that making everyone feel like they're part of the mission. They're not just delivering an instrument and then done, but that they are part of the overall big picture. I really appreciated that lesson from Keith.
Yeah, that's good.
So for me, my big takeaway was with respect to communication and the importance of it both down and in to the team and up and out. And this really resonated with me because I'm working on a project right now that is in the formulation stage. We've been staffing teams. We have to do a lot of communication, both with our branches about the staff we're bringing on to let them know what our new project is, with the program office to negotiate deliverables, with our directorate to make sure that we're all in agreement on what our commitments are going to be. And so I just thought it was very important what he was saying about managing the tone of the conversation in those meetings.
Thanks, Chris. That was both really good. And my lesson was to keep the end in mind. Beginning with the end in mind means to begin each day, task, or project with a clear vision of the desired direction and destination, and then continue by ensuring the team is proactive to make progress to move forward. And we really felt that one of his favorite quotes tied well into this. A key to successful project and program management is to keep folks passionate about mission success. You can also see why his favorite movie is The Blues Brothers. It's an excellent combination of comedy and blues music. And when leading a project, as I'm truly learning now, you're hoping the project catches a good rhythm like blues, but you also have to just enjoy it along the ride. So thanks for your time, and we're going to entertain any questions you guys have. Thanks.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Hope you can hear us.
Yeah, I had a major system crash. Got the blue screen of death on my main computer, so I'm now on my backup.
Oh, wow. Well, we can feel you. I was having some serious internet issues, and I think I messed Kristen up during her presentation, so I'm sorry.
Well, I think the trunk monkey got me. So anyway, we got a couple of questions. Let me see here. I'm going to look. I'm still getting things booted back up, but let's see. So you mentioned your lessons learned. So I guess the first question is, for each of you, what one lesson do you think you can apply right now on your current job? The easy, that you took away that you can start doing today.
I'll start first. There's one that I've started already because our project, to be honest, started with unclear expectations in this specific area. And one thing Keith said, which I think Andrea brought up, was to start off these meetings, it may have been Kristen, sorry, to start off meetings talking about the vision and talking about something positive. Because so many times we kind of get stuck in a rut and we just focus on what's going on that day that we're not keeping that vision in mind. So now I just started every weekly and every monthly to just talk about some highlights from across all four elements, not just the element that I'm responsible for, so everyone can see, hey, we're focused on the mission, we're focused on the vision, and we're all moving forward with one team. So I've already started using that nugget, and it was a great nugget, and it's been turning around over the last couple of weeks. It's been proven to be successful. So it was a good question, by the way.
So I can go next, and I would say that the one thing that he talked about that is something I can implement right away is kind of building those team relationships. And I know that being on a new team, we sort of have talked in different forums about how that's difficult to do virtually, especially if you're on a new team and you don't know people. So one of the things that I've done is set up meetings with different people on my team, so I have an opportunity to have kind of an open forum with them, and it sort of replaces that walk down the hall and have a conversation time that we don't get in this virtual environment.
So for me personally, I'm going to go back to the last slide on the lessons learned. One of the things that I'm, using as a takeaway right away is, like I mentioned, like Keith with JPSS and him having instruments spread out all over the country, I'm in the similar situation. And so how I'm interacting with the instrument teams, and when I meet with them, not just discuss what's going on with their instrument and their development, but the overall mission to really make sure that they're feeling like they're part of the overall mission.
Okay, excellent. Next question is from Peter. How long did you shadow Keith?
Well, so we actually did an interview. It wasn't a shadowing opportunity, but he carved out probably a little over an hour of time. We had sent him questions ahead for us to interview, and then we actually followed up with him several times after, just with clarifying and asking for additional input from him.
I will say by the end of the meeting, though, we all decided we're going to have to do one-on-one mentoring sessions with Keith.
Yeah, I was just going to add that on.
It wasn't enough time.
Right.
Yeah.
He had such good nuggets and so much more we wanted to dive into that it was really obvious it would be great to follow up with him on individual topics.
Yeah, actually part of why my vote was for our team to select Keith was I had approached him as a possible mentor for the FPDP program, but he had already committed with somebody else.
Oh, sorry. Okay. All right. One more question. For each of you, what single element to Keith's personality made you want to continue working with him as a mentor? What built that relationship so quickly? Good question.
I'll go first. I'd say it's his enthusiasm for what he does. It just comes out immediately. And so, I mean, seeing somebody that excited about their job just automatically gets you excited. And he's also just extremely approachable. Like, Milton went into his background and he has such an impressive resume, but he's extremely approachable and humble. And so that was, one of my favorite parts of talking with Keith.
Yeah, just to echo what you said, Andrea, I felt like his enthusiasm is inspiring. It's easy to see how he can inspire a team because he just brings such an excitement and energy for the work. And he talked about, and I think Andrea mentioned it in her slides, how much he loves his job, and it's just really obvious in talking to him. So it's just that excitement kind of transfers in, being around him.
Yeah. And I really appreciated his authenticity. He was open about mistakes, and he was open about how much he needs other people for the mission to be successful. It's not just him. He can't lean on himself, which I thought was just great. That's important because I know I can't do it by myself. I need all these other smart folks. So, yep.
So I got one more question, and then we need to take a break from Larry. Did Keith elaborate on how to hold a team member accountable when their performance is not up to par?
So I'd say that part was actually in my part of the presentation. He talked about, having that open conversation, laying out where the expectations were not being met. He didn't go into more specifics. He more so probably with Milton and dealing with challenges with the spacecraft that came up. And Milton, I don't know if you want to speak more about that.
Yeah, I think something that he alluded to as well in that context, that Andrea's discussion, is that you want to lean on folks' strengths, and they can remain on the mission. You're going to keep them accountable to something. You're going to try to find their strengths. They'll remain on the mission, but maybe where they are is not where they should be, and maybe there's other places and other opportunities on the mission. Not to get them off the mission, but on the mission where they can be best used. So he's driving that accountability. He's managing those expectations, but he knows at some point he may have to find another place for them where they can be successful, which is ultimately the best for the mission. So.
Very good.
He did specifically, though, with the spacecraft also laid out about having to have, when they were dealing with issues, short-term, mid-term, and long-term corrective actions. So while he didn't specifically say it, I wonder if he would take that same approach with dealing with performance issues with an individual.
And it's a great question. So maybe we'll take that offline with Keith and see if we can get back to you guys. That is a great question.
Yeah, that'd be a good one maybe to even follow up on. That's good. Hey, excellent job, guys. Appreciate it, Milton, Andrea, and Kristen. Did a great job. So we're going to take a quick 10-minute break. Hopefully I can get my system back up and running. And then we'll be ready for our last session of the day with Kathy Leaders. So see you in 10 minutes.